The second biggest oil reserve in the entire country is now here in California. But they've got this massive roadblock, which is Gavin Newsom and the Democrat machine. So they're using every regulatory trick in the book to block this operation. Doesn't mean we're not using oil, but it means that instead of getting it from here in California, we're getting it from other countries and shipping it halfway across the world. It makes absolutely no sense. It's a total insanity what they're doing. Hello everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. If you've been following our work at Cal Doge, we've issued 3 fraud reports now. You may have seen them. I want you to meet today one of the key people behind our ability to find this fraud. That is a really interesting conversation. It's some really interesting technology that we've been working with, technology partner, and that is coming up later in the show, along with Shelley, who's got some more unbelievable details about the scams that Democrats are perpetrating on all of us here in California, including unbelievable street lights. Like, remember the other week we were talking about potholes and the street repair fund and all this kind of scandal in LA, where they just have decided not to spend money on that. Well, here's another one related, which is street lights. Wait till you hear what they're doing on that, as well as where the money is going from the so-called greenhouse gas reduction fund and the scams that are going on there. It's just unbelievable. Every single time you look under the hood of what's going on in California with our budget and with spending and with taxes, it just makes your blood boil. So we've got a bit of that. It's just warning, I suppose. Get ready, sit down, and be ready for some really unbelievable details there from Shelley. But I want to start today with a version of this, I suppose, which is while we're in this situation where I'm not yet elected governor, as I plan to be in November, taking office next January, you've got this absolutely useless, failed, corrupt regime in California. Gavin Newsom, now the governor, this is in his 8th year. Before that, Jerry Brown for 8 years. They've had total control of the legislature for all of that period, total control of all the other statewide offices. So it's one-party rule by the Democrats. And of course, it's been a disaster on every front. And people are really suffering, especially working-class Californians who are paying the highest costs in the nation for everything that matters, housing and gas and so on. Small businesses being completely driven to despair. I see it all the time. I'm on the road and you just see the struggle and the suffering for regular people, for small businesses, but everyone. I mean, billionaires are leaving because of the threat from the billionaires tax. It's on and on and on. These ridiculous policies that are totally driven by dogma and ideology rather than practicality, really hurting people. So what's interesting right now is that you've got a dynamic where the Trump administration, which is, of course, as far as the Democrats here are concerned, their sworn enemy is Trump. They all got insane Trump derangement syndrome, Gavin Newsom, more than any of them. I mean, remember, if you look back at the trajectory of last year politically, 2025 for Gavin Newsom, it started off disastrously for him. He started off with his new podcast and he was platforming, as they say, hated figures from the right, like my friend Charlie and Steve Bannon and all this. And it went down incredibly badly with the Democrats. And it was a real pushback from the activists and the hard left base of the Democratic Party, which of course is the only audience that Gavin Newsom cares about because he's running for president. He's not running California, he's running for president. That's very obvious. He's been away much of this year on this stupid, pathetic book tour that's been a bit of a flop. But still, if you look at last year, it started out with this kind of, let's be open and have conversations. That didn't work. So he went completely in the other direction, started this whole pathetic stunt of trolling President Trump, the social media stuff, incredibly aggressive, all of that, which to me is completely ridiculous, but clearly lapped up by the only audience he cares about, which is not me or any normal person. It's just the hardcore far left base, because he's going to be running in the presidential primary, and that's who he needs for that. And even on the policy front, not just on communication, you had a sense of cooperation, a cooperative attitude between Gavin Newsom and the Trump administration. He would say things like, let's work with the new Trump administration. Remember, this is going back to the beginning of last year, 2025. In fact, just before the president took office, he was here to visit the wildfires and see what was going on after the disaster in LA. And they had a good conversation, and there seemed like there was going to be cooperation, and that all changed. And now you've got the regime here in California, 100% Trump derangement, attack, attack, attack. You've got Newsom constantly pushing back on anything that Trump might say in relation to California. He now calls it California derangement syndrome. You've got Rob Bonta, the Attorney General. While we've got all these problems here in California with crime, and all he ever brags about is filing lawsuits against President Trump. So it's this totally confrontational posture. And yet what you see from the Trump administration at the federal level is action to actually help California and help Californians. And we've had a couple of examples of that just this week, where you've seen the president and his cabinet do things that are very sensible, completely in line with what I would do as governor, in the teeth of opposition from Gavin Newsom. But all they've got to say is it's Trump, so it's bad. But if you look at the details, it's not bad. It's good. It's practical stuff to help people. One of them is housing, remember, we have the highest housing costs in the country, the lowest home ownership rate in the country, another disaster caused by their policies. And a big part of it is all the endless regulations that they put onto building houses that make it so expensive, and the fees and the taxes and all these things that Democrats do. Most people aren't aware of all of that. They just look at the high costs and assume that, that's California. That's what we inevitably will get. It's not inevitable. It's the direct result of the regulations that are put on housing in its broadest sense. I mean, it's a lot of it is state and local regulation that the federal government can't do anything about. That's why you need me as governor. For example, the war on single-family homes, the zoning, the fact that you can't really, they don't want to build outwards. They only want to build upwards, apartment buildings in suburban areas, all that kind of stuff. We talked about that a lot. So that can be changed and will be changed by me as governor by reforming all of that and ending the war on single-family homes, so we can build the kind of homes that people want to live in. And instead of forcing housing into places that don't want it with these endless battles and lawsuits and centrally imposed housing targets on every single city in California, that's all going to end when I'm governor. And we're going to allow housing to be built in the places that do want it, of which there are many in California. I've seen them. I've been there. So that's all going to be done at the state level. That change can't happen till next January when I take office. But in the meantime, you've had a pair of executive orders from the president that would make a real difference in California in terms of reducing regulations on the cost of building, some of these climate mandates that have made everything so expensive. So let's see what Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta and these Democrats do here. They're going to block action by the federal government to make housing more affordable after all their lectures on housing. We will see. The other big one is on energy. And of course, energy is a huge driver of the fact that everything is so expensive in California. Directly, of course, when it comes to the bills that you pay, when you pay to fill up your car and truck, the gas prices you pay, but also your electric bills. Those are things you pay directly. But energy and the high cost of energy in California makes everything else more expensive. We actually have the most expensive groceries in the country, for example, and that is partly driven by energy costs. And the reason that we have high energy costs is because of this ideology of scarcity when it comes to energy, which is that, you can't have too much energy produced, that's bad for the climate. It's all driven by this climate dogma. Of course, the war on fossil fuels, meaning that they've shut down over the years. Again, we've talked about this many times, oil and gas production in California. But we're not using less oil and gas, not in any meaningful sense. We're just importing it now. And so I often talk about my plan to open up California oil and gas production. And sometimes you're in a conversation with left-wing media outlets, whatever. So what you're saying is drill, baby, drill. I'm saying, yeah, drill, baby, drill in California. Gavin Newsom's policy is drill, baby, drill in Iraq, which is our number one provider of oil right now. Or the Amazon rainforest, where we're the number one buyer of oil from the Amazon rainforest. So what's better? Drill, baby, drill in Iraq and the Amazon rainforest, or right here in California, which means that we can get the oil to the refineries through a nice clean pipeline instead of shipping it halfway across the world in giant supertankers spewing out carbon emissions. And yet that's what their policy is. It's completely insane. Now, a big move happened just in the last week, which is that there's this oil operation that's been off the coast of Santa Barbara for many years. I mean, they're a very familiar sight. You see those oil platforms out there. And everyone in the area knows about this. And it's been bought by a company called Sable Energy. And they've discovered it's now the second biggest oil reserves in the entire country, second only to the Permian Basin, which has been this huge boon for fracking and so on, and really helped deliver energy independence and dominance for our country, the Permian Basin. Well, the number two in the country is now here in California, off the coast. And Sable Energy is all set to do it, but they've got this massive roadblock, which is Gavin Newsom and the Democrat machine, which won't let them use the pipeline that takes it from the platforms to the coast. State property, state parks, all this. So they're using every regulatory trick in the book to block this operation. Again, remember, doesn't mean we're not using oil, but it means that instead of getting it from here in California, we're getting it from other countries and shipping it halfway across the world. It makes absolutely no sense at all, but they're doing it because they want to look like they're fighting fossil fuels. It's totally insane. By the way, the other insanity of it is because this has been blocked, this oil drilling has been blocked there for many years by California. What you're actually seeing, there's a huge pressure building up. And I spent a lot of time, I was just with oil industry people just the other day talking about all of this. And also when I was in Santa Barbara the other week, we did a couple of events there, and you hear it from local people. Because of the pressure building up, because they've blocked the drilling, you've now got what they call seepage, seeps, oil seeping out of the sand. And so it's harming the local environment that you're not getting it out. It's seeping, it's just bubbling up. And so on every single front, it's ridiculous what the California regime, Newsom and all these other people, they're ridiculous agencies, the Coastal Commission, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, the state parks, bureaucracies involved in it. It's a total insanity what they're doing. Totally, it doesn't even meet any environmental goals. It just doesn't make sense. Well, what's just happened? The federal government, Chris Wright, the energy secretary, has invoked the Defense Production Act to allow Sable to start drilling oil and to send it through that pipeline. And that's happened. They did the order on Friday, and the operations began on Monday this week. We're taping it Tuesday, so just yesterday. And so this is a huge move in a common sense direction, because it means that we will actually now be bringing the oil up instead of letting it seep into the ground, and we will be adding to California production so that our refineries can stay open and so on. Now, it's only going to be a small amount to start with, I think 50,000 barrels, but this is a huge find that they've got there. And the justification from the federal government, they're taking the moment to say, look, there's obviously an issue with oil supply because of the situation in the Middle East, with Iran and so on. And so let's do everything we can to increase production here in America. And this is an example of that. But actually, long term, we should be giving a massive green light to this, because it makes no sense to be importing oil while we've got these big reserves right here in California that can create jobs and wealth and opportunity right here. So it's another example of how you've got the federal government doing something sensible, the California government right now blocking it. I mean, there are many examples I could throw in there. You know, you've got, not that long ago, I think halfway through last year, the president and his team put out a really thoughtful and smart executive order on forest management, how we should be thinning the forest to reduce wildfire risk and opening up the forest to lumber and timber production, which we used to have and has been driven out of the state. Again, just like with the oil, we're not using less timber, we're just now importing it. We're trucking it in from Oregon and Canada instead of taking it from our own forests here, which have become overgrown and a massive wildfire risk. The president puts out an executive order on how to manage the forest better. Of course, California says, no, thanks, it's Trump, so it must be bad. It's just ridiculous. But this is the good news. Once we take office in January, once I win in November and take office in January, you're going to have a partner. You're going to have a partner for the federal government when it tries to do sensible things that help California. And the impact of that is going to be huge, really transformational. So for at least the first 2 years of my administration, we know that there will be a really close working relationship with the federal administration, not just because we agree on the policies, but I happen to know that. I know the president, I know half the cabinet. It's going to be a really, really good working relationship. and it will benefit Californians. So this Trump derangement syndrome, it's all politics. It actually harms Californians. It stops sensible things being done that will make things more affordable in California, that will help families and businesses, and that's all going to end when I'm elected in November and take office next January. Susan Shelley joining us with some upsetting stories about California, but it's okay. Help is on the way. At the end of this year, we have a chance to vote to change all this. But in the meantime, the nonsense continues. There's some big numbers involved in some of the stories you got today and big topics. Let's start with Medicaid, Medi-Cal, as it's called in California. You've got some new information on that.
Yes, the Legislative Analyst's Office says that Medi-Cal spending is growing faster than the state budget, and the state budget is growing very quickly. The spending on the state budget is growing very quickly, and Medi-Cal is growing even faster. And one of the problems that they have is that the One Big Beautiful Bill, H.R. 1, signed by President Trump last July, is going to make some changes to who is eligible for Medicaid, Medi-Cal. And this is a work requirement where people who are able-bodied adults without kids, there are various exceptions, but if you don't qualify for an exception and you're an able-bodied person in working years, you have to either work or study or volunteer or have some kind of what they call community engagement, 80 hours a month. And California projects that 1.4 or so million people will not be able to meet this, even though they're required, and they will drop off Medi-Cal. And then there's a second requirement that's in the One Big Beautiful Bill that says if you are one of these people, working age adults, that doesn't qualify for an exception, you have to redetermine your eligibility every 6 months instead of every year. And it's possible that these are just anti-fraud measures, because if people have been enrolled fraudulently, if they aren't real people or they don't know they've been enrolled, then they won't redetermine their eligibility and they won't fulfill the work requirements and do the paperwork, and they will fall off the rolls. So that's a way of getting at some of the fraud that's been alleged in the Medi-Cal Medicaid program. And meanwhile, all of the cities and the state of California are complaining that these are Medi-Cal cuts and that this is devastating and they have to have tax increases. So you have the SEIU Healthcare Workers West Union trying to do the billionaires tax and take 5% of the assets of billionaires in California, which is causing them to be billionaires in Texas and billionaires in Florida at a very quick pace. And they want to take that money and they want to put it into the healthcare system to pay for this ongoing expense of Medi-Cal. 14.5 million California residents, that's more than a third of the state, 14.5 million are on Medi-Cal.
It's amazing. I mean, Medi-Cal, just to be clear, this is supposed to be the safety net program for the poor.
Right. This is for low-income California residents. 14.5 million people qualify for that, which is a staggering number for several reasons. It's staggering because it's way more than the state of California can afford, and it's growing. And it's staggering because we always hear from the current governor that the economy in California is the fourth largest in the world and everything's fabulous. And clearly it's not fabulous for a lot of people, because that's a lot of people on Medi-Cal.
What is the balance in terms of the payment between federal money and California state tax money?
It depends on the category of the population. For the undocumented immigrant population, 0 is the federal match. And the federal match, I think, is 50% generally. In some cases, the federal government pays more. There's a population that was part of the Obamacare, Affordable Care Act expansion. I think the reimbursement might be as high as 90% for that group. So it depends on the situation, but it's, in general, you could say it's about 50%.
We've talked about the undocumented illegal immigrant Medi-Cal expansion. I mean, that's another thing that's just worth adding into things as part of those numbers and part of that cost. This is what Gavin Newsom bragged about, and proudly said we're giving healthcare to everybody. It's a lot of money, and as you always point out, just remind everyone who haven't seen you speak about this before, when the argument comes, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to let, there's a lot of illegal immigrants in California. We know that. We don't know the exact number, but we know that it's in the many, many millions. So what are you going to do? All those people are going to die in the street, or are they going to use emergency care in a more expensive way for regular illness. What's the answer to that?
Well, the answer in other states is that Medicaid is provided for emergencies, for pregnancy. There's a list of things that are covered, various types of immunization, so there aren't communicable diseases. This is covered in what's called emergency or restricted scope Medicaid. And that's in every state. That's everywhere. That was what we had in California before they started expanding what's called full scope Medicaid. And full scope Medicaid is everything, including long-term care. So that's better than most Americans have from their policies. Dental care, prescription drugs, specialists, full scope Medicaid is everything. But here's the problem with that. You can say you're giving that to everybody, but that doesn't make more doctors. That doesn't make more hospitals. That actually makes fewer providers per person on the program. And then the people who suffer are the low-income people in California who were previously entitled to this program before it was expanded. And as of last October, the legislative analyst says 1.7 million undocumented adults are on the Medicaid program, Medi-Cal, which is a lot, 1.7 million.
The other part about this, there was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal that was criticizing the billionaires tax, and I love the way you put that. It's not reducing the number of billionaires or even reducing their billions. It's just increasing the number of billionaires in other states. But the Wall Street Journal pointed out that the pretext for this, which is cuts in federal Medicaid spending, actually, I'm just going to quote from this editor. This is the end of January. The governor might try, because he's talking about the budget problems that this is allegedly needed to fill. The governor might try explaining to voters that state's budget problems don't owe to the wealthy not paying enough in tax, as unions claim, nor to federal funding cuts. California's federal Medicaid dollars this year are projected to increase by $18 billion. So what's that about?
I believe some of the changes take effect in 2027, so it might be that. But there were changes made to stop California and 6 other states from using provider taxes in a way that drives more federal dollars to those states. For example, California has what's called a managed care organization tax, and they can raise it, and then what happens is the managed care organization pays the tax. California gives the money back to the managed care organization as a Medicaid payment, and then at that point the federal government covers half of it. So Dr. Oz has said that there's a new federal rule and they're closing what he called a loophole, and says California is not paying its fair share and not providing additional expansion to the program or services for the recipients. It's just essentially cheating the taxpayers in other states.
I mean, the whole thing seems just a classic example of government bloat.
It's too much spending, and there isn't enough money to cover it. So then they're looking for clever workarounds to find a way to get the federal government to cover it. And the federal government has caught on to the game and is shutting it down. And so the problems for California, having expanded the program, are now very evident. First of all, it cost much more than they anticipated, or than they said they anticipated, to cover adult illegal immigrants. And the reimbursement from the federal government isn't there. And the number of people who are qualified for this is endless, because people can come from other states. And the governor has now cut back on these benefits. So for all that he's going on a book tour and saying everybody's covered for everything, they've now cut the dental benefits for the undocumented population. They've added a $30 per month premium payment, and they've closed new enrollment to adults. The other thing that he said is that his finance people said that they are going to enforce the work requirements on the undocumented population, even though California doesn't have to do that because they're not getting federal funding directly for that population. Nonetheless, the math is the math, and it's not adding up for California, and so the governor is forced to take these actions.
And they're just the taxes keep going up, but everything seems to be getting worse.
Yes, the taxes are going up, and everybody's claiming they need sales tax increases to cover healthcare costs, and this is what's happening.
You know what? I mean, we're going to get onto it as well. There's another story you've got, which is a local tax increase. It just feels to me as if we've just got to stop. And I don't know whether, I'm going to look into what a governor could do about this and whether I could do this. But it just feels like we've just got to stop at least just freeze, and just while we figure everything out and look at what needs to be structurally reformed. Nothing, no new taxes, no new fees, nothing, no new laws. I mean, it's just constantly the government gets bigger and bigger and more bloated, and the taxes keep going up. And they have all these hidden taxes that they don't call taxes, but actually are. We'll get to that in a second. And it just feels like we have to just stop it all. Just stop it for I don't know, just a 2-year freeze on everything to do with government. Just so while we can get a grip of it all and look at ways we can reduce it.
Well, one of the things that's gone wrong in California is they are driving businesses out of the state. And businesses are the source of the tax revenue. It's the jobs, it's the taxes people pay when they're working. And when you drive companies out of the state of California, that's fewer jobs. That's more people who would be working who are in the safety net. So that's more expenses. And you don't have the tax revenue coming in from the employment that's going on and the economic productivity. So the governor's frequently saying that it's the largest economy, on and on. However, that's an average, and that's based on GDP. And GDP, I believe, includes government spending. So that's a very distorted number. And when you look at how many people are in the Medicaid enrollment in this state, you can see that people are hurting, and they're not able to support themselves in the style which Californians should be able to support themselves just by working.
It's a very distorted number. And the other distortion is that, I mean, it's a great point that it includes the government, which is growing much faster, as this story shows. Medicaid growing faster than the budget even, and the budget's growing faster than the economy, and it's growing faster than the population. I mean, everything is going wrong. You know, there was a story just the other day. I think that I shared it on social media. It was about how just in the Bay Area they looked at this is the Washington Post, I believe, did an analysis of Bay Area counties. So this is not even the state government, and looked at their population change, comparing it to their budget change over the last 5 years or so. The population was all down or barely moved. The budgets were up 40%, 50%, 60%. Just wildly out of whack with what judicious, management would suggest. It's just got to stop.
It's a problem of overspending and not enough revenue. Rosy projections on the revenue, justifying higher and higher spending, long-term contracts for public employees based on rosy projections of revenue. The revenue doesn't come in. And then you have a structural deficit. And the LAO, the Legislative Analyst's Office, is projecting $35 billion a year in deficits in California after the current year. So this is a serious issue, this overspending. And what the governor's doing, what Governor Newsom is doing, is adding more programs. He wants to do an incentive program for zero-emission vehicles, for light-duty vehicles. And even the legislative analysts said that's not a good idea.
Well, okay, let's get to that. That's the second story, which is about the greenhouse gas fund, or whatever they call it, from the Cap and it's now Cap and Invest, isn't it? Cap and Trade.
Cap and Invest.
Tell us about this.
Well, Cap and Invest should be called scarcity and spending, because that's what it is. They're creating scarcity of energy by taxing it in a very high way. The Cap and Invest program used to be called Cap and Trade, dates to 2006. It's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program. And the idea is that the California Air Resources Board will charge for emitting greenhouse gases. And these permits will be auctioned and sold on a secondary market. There will be a limited number of permits, and then every so often they will lower the number of available permits, and that's what's happening now. They are lowering the number of available permits, and they're changing how many offsets people can use to continue to operate, because environmentalists don't like the offsets. They say that's just permission to pollute. Well, the trouble is that we are still using energy. And as a result, somebody's got to produce that energy. Somebody's got to produce aviation fuel and gasoline and natural gas for heating and every other kind of, for electricity, for manufacturing. We have to continue our economy, and this is a stranglehold on it. And what are they using this money for when they auction these permits to reduce greenhouse gases that are driving refineries to close, that are driving prices up? They use it for political spending. Now, some of it they're using just to cover the hole in the budget. For instance, the current Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund plan from the legislature and from the governor, it it's spending $1.25 billion a year on CAL FIRE so that the general fund doesn't have to pay for firefighting. So it's just like a tax. And then they're spending $1 billion a year to build the bullet train. And then they've got a whole long list of other things that they want to spend the money on. And it's quite a fight. A couple of years ago, they made arrangements to spend billions of dollars on transit. And now they're taking that out. They don't want to spend any money on transit. They're going to spend it on, according to the governor, this zero emission vehicle incentive program instead of what was promised to BART, for instance, for a program that they need that money to draw down federal dollars as a match from the Department of Transportation. And if they don't have the local money, they can't get the federal money. So it's a problem if they essentially cancel out what previous commitment was.
Wait, let's just go into that in a bit more detail. So this was money from the state budget
Right.
for transit projects across the state.
For the greenhouse gas reduction fund part
Right, so
of the
this was
budget.
not the budget.
Right.
This was from the
Right.
fund.
Right, which is a fund inside the Treasury, so it might as well be the budget, but it's not in the budget.
So they had money for transit from the greenhouse gas fund, and now
Right.
he's changed that.
Right, it
And
was
he's deleted the BART money.
It was deferred from the plan that they had for greenhouse gas reduction that they set in 2024, I believe. And they promised that they would pay it in a couple of years, and now they're canceling it.
Wow, so he's cancelled the money for transit, including... The reason I'm going on about this is there's another example of how they get you in the end, because there's a ballot initiative that they've... I think it's on the ballot for a local sales tax increase for BART.
Exactly. And the more they can create a crisis of lack of funding, the louder they can be in the advertising.
So this is really sneaky. This is a brilliant... I'm so glad. So here's what they've done, right? He wants this zero emission vehicle thing, right? Whatever that is. They don't have any money. So what do? They steal the money that was allocated for BART and instead allocate it to this thing that no one really wants. And then they say, but it's okay because we can tax people extra for the BART money because we think that will pass as a ballot initiative.
Well, if they can create this loud crisis, we don't have any funding, it's the end of the world, and they're not telling you that they had funding for it, and they're diverting the funding.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
It's in the legislative analyst's report on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund budget.
Because that BART thing, obviously, depends where you live, but here in the Bay Area, that's a big story, and the ballot initiative is a bit, and I think it's again, classic sort of Democrats, incredibly fiddly, different percentage increases for different counties. I think San Francisco has a higher increase compared to some of the other Bay Area counties.
San Francisco 1%, and then 4 surrounding counties 0.5%. But it's a sales tax increase, and that's very regressive.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
So what is this ZEV? What is this?
Well, the federal government stopped subsidizing the purchase of electric vehicles, and the governor of California feels it's his job to step up and save that market because it can't exist without subsidies. And so...
Oh, so this is another handout for rich people to buy Teslas, basically.
I think so. I think this they said light duty, so that would be pickup trucks. So the idea that California has had is that they will mandate it and then somehow industry will create it. And they have a very arrogant view that as soon as a new technology exists, they can mandate it without thinking about what it costs, what infrastructure is needed to support it. Because if you have trucks that need to be recharged, you have to have charging infrastructure that can accommodate that. Well, who pays for that? Ratepayers probably get stuck with that. The CPUC, the Public Utilities Commission, previously said that a mandate for electric trucks would be partially funded by ratepayers on the utility side to build that infrastructure. Well, that raises everybody's electric rates. And what's the point? What is the point if these trucks are not ready, if the market has not created a demand for them and a product that people want to buy? Why is the government trying to mandate it? And the governor's view is that if you don't mandate it, no one will do it. Well, and that might be the right answer. No one should do it.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is really interesting. I did not know that. So how much is the total? So the greenhouse gas fund, what is that? Is that what it's called? The
Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is projected to take in $3.8 billion in 2026-27. $3.8 billion. And where does that money come from? It comes directly from higher prices and higher utility rates.
So that's paid by big oil companies, utilities, and so on,
Right.
producers of greenhouse gases.
Right. And then CARB gives away a certain number of allowances to try and mitigate the cost increases, because if it was all passed straight through, people would not be able to afford electricity, gasoline, anything. And we're almost there now. So as they're revising this rule, which is going to be finalized in May, what's going to happen is they're going to have to try to balance how many allowances they're going to give away, how many allowances they're going to charge for, what's that price going to be, how much is that going to hurt people when that price is passed through, how much do they need the money for the bullet train. They can't do anything that causes those allowances to not create the revenue that they're counting on for the fire department. This is all a scam. This is no way to fund the state of California. This is so indirect. Instead of a normal conversation about a tax, we're pretending that we're saving the environment and basically charging people to breathe is how this works out.
The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, so that's 3 points, that's the total amount. And does CARB decide where that goes? Or is it the governor? Who's deciding that?
The legislature and the governor decide where that money will go. It's spent exactly like a tax. They say it's not a tax. It's collected at the point of a gun, basically, and it is spent by the legislature. It's a special fund in the Treasury, which is very convenient, and it's spent by the legislature and the governor.
Now, I mentioned earlier, another scam. This is a local tax in LA, streetlights. What's this about?
Well, the streetlights are being continuously vandalized. The copper wire is being stolen out of underground vaults, out of the light poles, out of everything. And the city of Los Angeles has decided to raise property taxes to pay for this ongoing expense of trying to keep up with the vandalism on the streetlights. So what they are doing is creating a lighting assessment district. This is a Prop 218 fee. Now what that means is from 1996, when they raise fees like this, the voters, the property owners in the area who will have to pay it, get a chance to protest it. It used to be that they could just vote in the city council and just charge people, but that was a sort of a parallel tax. And Prop 218 was the Right to Vote on Taxes Act in 1996. So here's the process. The city has to announce what they're going to do, what they're going to charge, how much each parcel is going to have to pay. Then they have to send out a ballot to every property owner that will be charged for it. People don't know this, and they probably throw it out. But this ballot is your opportunity to say no. And if you fill it out and you just say, I protest, and you check the no box, you put your address on there and you mail it back, if 50% plus one of the property owners who receive the ballot say no, it can't go through. But the thing is, it's not 50% plus one of the people who vote. It's 50% plus one of the people who are sent the ballot. So every time somebody throws it out, that's a yes vote. Watch for the ballot. It's coming in April, I believe, and then they will have the meeting in June to count the ballots. Now, we've already seen in Los Angeles, they've raised the sewer rates, they've raised the water rates, they've raised the electric rates. They're constantly raising the rates for the basic services that you thought you were already paying for, but it's never enough, especially when they're trying to keep up with vandalism, which they seem powerless to stop.
First of all, how much is this going to cost people, this tax?
If you have a single-family home on a quarter-acre lot, it's, I think, $147.50 a year, and it will be on your property tax bill on top of what you're already paying for streetlights. It'd be an additional charge. And some of the retail locations, the industrial locations, could be $1,000, could be $5,000 a year, depending on the size of the parcel.
Just yet another thing. We pay the highest taxes, and they keep it literally is this bottomless money pit.
Yes.
And what happens to so why can't they stop this? So there's what's going on with that? I hear that all the time when I'm in LA. The copper theft.
It's
What's
terrible.
going on?
There are thieves with heavy equipment who are just ravaging the infrastructure of the city. And this has been a problem for AT&T. It's been a problem for Spectrum. There have been landline disruptions because people are going into these manhole covers and stealing the copper wire and selling it to recyclers. Now, last fall, there was a law passed to try to crack down on the recyclers. But, that's a losing battle because they can move faster than the government can move to catch up with people who are crooks. So That's what's happening. There's money in selling this copper wire, and thieves are stealing it. And it takes a year to get a streetlight repaired
After it's been vandalized.
after it's been vandalized because there's such a backlog because of these thefts. So what are they going to do with this money that they're raising? They're raising $125 million a year with this assessment. Is it enough? Nobody really knows. They're talking about replacing the streetlights with solar streetlights that don't have copper wire. Well, I don't know how well that's going to work. On a cloudy day, you might not have streetlights.
But just, there are places in the world where this doesn't happen. Why does it happen? It's just crazy.
It is crazy. And it's it's a little bit similar to so many of the other crime problems in California. They've just sort of made a decision that crime is the fault of the people who are victims of it and not the people who are perpetrating it.
And they're basically subsidizing the crime. That's actually
Yes,
what
they
this is.
Yes.
Oh, well, we can't
And
stop it, so you taxpayers will have to.
right. Well, they built the 6th Street Bridge. They completely refurbished it. It was going to be the pride of the city. It had all of these beautiful LED lights and light effects. And 6 months later, it was completely stripped of all its copper wire.
So just last point. So this streetlight thing, is this just LA City? Is it the whole greater LA County? What's the nature of this problem?
This is the city. This is the city of Los Angeles doing this. So
But is the
watch for
copper
that.
wire theft happening across LA? You know, if you go to somewhere like Beverly Hills, do you have this issue?
I don't know if they're having the same problem in Beverly Hills, but they are definitely having it in Los Angeles and probably in Los Angeles County in general. But this particular measure is from the city of Los Angeles.
I want to find a way, as governor, to just stop everything for 2 years. No tax increases, no fee increases, no new laws of any kind, no new nothing that grows government in any way for 2 years while we figure out how to reduce it all.
It's a good point that you make, because one of the things that's in the greenhouse gas reduction budget plan is they're going to spend money on new positions to administer more of these regulations. So there you go. It's a hiring program for people who do useless things that annoy everyone.
Freeze everything. Just while we get a head around it all. Because obviously we have to cut it all. We have to cut taxes, cut spending, cut the bureaucracy, cut the positions in the government. All of that has to go down. But at least while you're doing that, just stop it getting worse.
That would be helpful.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see.
It'd be helpful to stop it getting worse. That would be good.
That's right. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. So you have seen our incredible fraud reports from Cal Doge, where we've been exposing the unbelievable scale of the Democrat theft of our taxpayer money for their political purposes and things that the money was not intended for, and so on. So we've put out a couple of fraud reports now, and you may have seen in the way that we've talked about it and the way that I've talked about it on social media, and Jenny Ray LaRue, who's running Cal Doge, you may have seen a reference to a company called Rhetor AI, RHETOR.ai, and a guy called Jeremy Jones, who I've tagged in all the posts that we've done and so on. Now, what's this company? Who's this guy? What have they got to do with it all? Well, here he is to explain. Jeremy, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Tell everyone the story of what you've been up to and how we're all working together. I think it's really important for everyone to understand.
Yeah, so we it's myself, my two co-founders, Elon and Vivek, started talking about this thing called Doge when President Trump was starting to get elected. I ran a small business in the city of Chicago. I put a lot of my own money into the business. We subsequently had to close our doors.
What kind of business?
We ran restaurants. So we did, we actually tried to
No
bring
way.
California to Chicago. So we did acai bowls, smoothies, salads, just like healthy QSR stuff. Took our own money. My mom's been doing raw vegan food for 10 plus years. So literally trying to take California to Chicago. She's been kind of this like pioneer in healthy eating. I have a background in health and wellness. So we're like, why don't we take this? My wife has a background in branding. Why don't we take this and try to build our own business, right? Like I was successful as a sales guy. I had some money. So it's like, great, let's just do the thing and try to build value, employ people, and, just try to actually do the thing, the American dream. COVID happened, and our government had other ideas. I'm a sore loser, and I saw what Elon and Vivek were doing, and I witnessed it firsthand, interfacing with the government, trying to get the Restaurant Revitalization Act passed via the Independent Restaurant Coalition. The restaurant industry does have a large lobby, but the large lobby only advocates for large QSRs and large franchisees.
QSR,
There
quick
aren't,
service restaurants, for those who don't understand, right?
yeah, QSRs, quick service restaurants, correct. So like your traditional poke bowl places, smoothie bowl places in California, right? Like quick service, you just walk up, get your stuff. Chipotle was the kind of pioneer of this, and McDonald's. But closed their doors. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of a sore loser, and I'm also kind of a technophile on the side. I like engaging with different ideas. A bunch of my friends were in a group chat together, and we're like, if we can't understand what our government does with our tax dollars, how can a 70-something-year-old senator? So why don't we take the US government, take this custom LLM stack, and just start prompting against it and create this public good called Doge AI_gov. We created a Twitter. The whole goal behind it was for it to be a watch Doge, right? So a public-facing kind of mouthpiece of what Doge was doing behind the scenes. And it kind of took a life of its own. Obviously, I don't know if we all remember, but to give everybody a recap, there's been a few times where I've seen kind of the uniparty come together, and none faster than running Elon out of Washington D.C. as quickly as they possibly could. As soon as USAID got cut and Doge started doing its thing, people started to get really upset, and you kind of start to see why, like in a perverse way. Under Biden, and this is as we start doing Cal Doge and start digging into the fraud, the two things that really stuck out to me is why. Number one, why does nobody care? It seems like at a political level, why does it take someone like you, who's an outsider, to actually start to show that things can be different? And then where's the political will to actually change things in Washington, D.C.? We should have a government by the governed, by the consent of the governed. The number one thing that we're essentially doing with fraud is borrowing from the future to play the present. And there's certain things that just don't feel right to the majority of electorate, and scam and fraud and abuse is definitely one of those in California and Minnesota and Chicago and all these places. But why doesn't it change? Where's the political will from the people to step up and say, hey, things should be different? And once you start to really look at the incentives, they're actually pretty perverse. Like as a business owner, I'm sure you've had experience running businesses. Everything that interfaces with government, it's actually easier to do fraudulently than it is to do correctly. And it only gets worse. I mean, I don't need to tell you, you're running for governor of California. It only gets worse in places like California and Chicago and New York. It almost becomes, the system is designed for it to be defrauded, and it's designed to put roadblocks in the way via red tape and other perverse things that stop value creation.
So let me just dive into a couple of areas. First of all, I love that we have obviously a lot of connections here, because I ran a couple of restaurants in London back in the day, so I know that business very well. It's very difficult. So as I always say, in California, it's an incredibly tough business at the best of times.
Yes.
And here and right now, certainly in California, they're making it the absolute worst of times. But I really know about that business, and it's really difficult. So we should, at some point, we'll get up here and talk about that. So the things that I wanted to ask you about, how just the move from that, a kind of a very real world business, right, to an online business. And specifically, you mentioned something like Doge_AI, something like that. So did you, and how did that become Rhetor, and just talk about the sort of practicalities here?
So I'm kind of privileged to have people in my life that are much, much smarter than I. My two co-founders are much, much smarter than I. I'm just very good with words. So my co-founder Sahaj, he's 24. He's kind of a whiz when it comes to large language models. And we were just in a group chat one day, and we're like, why don't we? I've had my frustrations with the government for obvious reasons, running a restaurant. He's had his frustrations of trying to get a visa. He's one of the smartest people I know, and he's had his frustrations of getting a visa as he's seeing illegal immigrants storm across the border under Biden. And he's like, he lives in Canada currently. He's like, I could just drive my car down to the United States and be there illegally. Why is it so difficult for me to do this? We saw what Elon was doing, and I don't think really people understand this scale. I'm sure people know people who are busy. You're running for governor of California. Elon runs multiple billion-dollar businesses, and he felt the best use of his time, which is the one thing that you can't pay him for, was best used going to our government and trying to resolve the issues of fraud, waste, and abuse. And to us, that was a huge signal. And it emboldened us to go and say, okay, if Elon can do it with all of the few minutes that he has in the day, why don't we take our know-how and technology and try to serve our kids in our future? I've got two little girls. How about we get off the sidelines and actually start doing something and getting on the ground? So we built Doge AI, and it's, like I said, it was a public good. Really what we did was we took all bills and all spending data, hooked it up to an LLM, and you could query it. Before you could add Grok on Twitter, you could add DogeAI_gov on Twitter and just fact check politicians and posts. Kind of went viral. President Trump retweeted it twice. Elon engaged. Elon's co-founder at XAI saw what we were doing. Sahaj built everything. He's a genius, so he built everything on GitHub, open source. For those that don't know, that's like opening up your kimono and as an engineer and saying, have at it. If you want to replicate it, here's everything that we have. So XAI reached out, and they wanted to hire Say to run Grok for them before you could add Grok on Twitter. So we sat back and we're like, okay, this is much larger than we thought. This is a real business. So let's go raise some venture money. Let's go take some of our technology and try to go help campaigns win. Because for me, living in, again, it's like one of these things. I'm a capitalist. I build businesses. It felt so perverse that folks, if you are a merit-based politician or trying to get into politics, you don't know where to start. I'm sure you've had the same kind of like idea of like, okay, you have money, you're successful, you want to run on merit, but how is a Republican, as a someone who wants to fix the system, how do you get into politics? It's very easy to get into business, get a loan, go get money, open up a door, try to provide value. As a politician, it felt so perverse, and it felt like there's so many roadblocks in the way. So for us, we're like, how do we, number one, our belief is we need to get more people who are interested in building the future into politics. We are...
Wait. I want to stop you there. So you
Yes, please.
you start off with something that is querying public records of
Yeah.
legislation and spending,
Yes.
right? So that kind of public accountability, the Doge. So you built something that anyone could, like, what's the actual thing? Tell me how much they spent on this program in the last 10 years, something like
Yeah,
that.
literally anything. It was the most publicly available expert on government. So you could ask it about any bill, you could
That
ask
was
it about
Doge,
any
what did
spending
you call
data.
it? Doge_.ai.
So it was public facing. It was dogeai.chat, so you could query it. We're rebalancing that for private use. But right now you can jump on Twitter. Twitter is doing something with bots and automated tweeting and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of gone in the background, but you can kind of see it's just underscore. It's called Watch Doge on Twitter. And at its peak, we were tweeting 2,000 times a day, ingesting 10,000 tweets a day. It was responding within the first 5 minutes to public officials, to President Trump. And the whole point behind it was, how can we hold our public officials accountable?
It was searching spending data and legislative data. Got it.
And fact checking in real time.
Okay, fact checking who?
Anybody that we're talking to, any politician in real time.
Okay.
The whole point of it was to fact check in real time.
So that's that's a sort of public accountability tool. How do you then get to the mission of helping people get into politics? That feels like the different thing.
Well, it's two-tiered, right? Like I think if you want to change the system, I think you have to do it from the outside. You have to get young people to feel like they have skin in the game in a meaningful way, and you have to get the people who can lead the country forward off the sidelines. And the only way you do that is if you create merit. And it's honestly like, I think there's a lot of, maybe in California folks know, but the technology stack for Republicans versus Democrats is kind of skewed in the Democrat favor. The Democrats have a lot of technology and a lot of skills, but they don't have the correct policies, in my opinion. And Republicans have, in some ways, correct policies, but are very, very tech light. So in our perspective was like, if we create a flat system, if we were able to provide candidates bipartisan, the correct way to communicate at scale, to get their message out, and to circumvent the consultant kind of way in the middle and do it at scale, that to me creates an easier way for folks to get off the sideline and run, especially young people, grassroots candidates, those kind of things. And then if we actually have transparency and communication at scale. So for instance, you're running for government. You probably get thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands mentions every single day. There are people that you want to communicate with. If we all remember I don't know, I'm young, but I volunteered on Barack Obama's campaign, and I still remember he was the pioneer for social kind of fundraising and distributed fundraising at scale. He had this thing called mybarackobama.com, I think it was called. It was some website, MyMBO or something. And the whole idea behind it was grassroots finance fundraising. So if I was a champion for Barack Obama and want to change, I could host a grassroots fundraiser, get involved, volunteer without any contact with the campaign. Our view is that that direct relationship needs to be restored in a way that actually holds the person accountable for what they're trying to do. And that relationship with the government needs to be somehow built again. And we want to be the technology provider that does it transparently and does it honestly with folks that deserve to be in government.
I started a business a while back called CrowdPack, which was specifically focused on the fundraising aspect of it. And the mission of CrowdPack was to make it easier for independent and independent-minded candidates to run for office without relying on big donors and the party machines. That was our mission. So I've been in a lot of these. That was like, gosh, when did we start? 2013, a while back.
Yeah, so 5 years after mine, because what people don't know, Act Blue came out of the website that Barack Obama built, right? And if you look at Zohar Mamdani, James Tallarico, pretty much any Democrat that has a social cohesion and has young voters, they get a large number of grassroots donations, and it's impossible to do that on the Republican Party
So
currently.
then I want to switch to the go back to Doge, right?
Yes.
What's the because you're helping us at Cal Doge find this information. So is this going back to the previous iteration of the business? And or tell us about that, because what you and I are working on now with Cal Doge is the kind of auditing and transparency point rather than people running for office.
Yeah, so Cal Doge is mostly a public good where we put the time together. I think we're spending about 80 hours a month on it, and it is a beast because California is so massive, and we haven't really found a partner. I think obviously your funds need to be spent on running for government. That's really important. It's nice and fine if we build the thing, but if we have another Democratic governor, it doesn't really matter. So we need somebody who's actually going to do something about it. Funnily enough, now LA is trying to reduce and remove the comptroller's office, which it's like trying to get rid of the police because you know that you're in trouble. But Cal Doge really started for us as a thought experiment. Algorithms are really good at large data sets. And a really good way to think about artificial intelligence is not that it's artificial or intelligent. What it's really good at is taking what the human being isn't good at, is taking 100 million data points, finding and looking at those data points and finding commonalities amongst those data points. And the beauty about this fraud, especially in places like California, I guess not the beauty for people who live there, but the beauty for us is number one, they all have to file 990 filings, which means that there's a ton of public information about it. It's so in the open.
Who's they? Who has to file? What do they have to put? Just go through that slowly.
Yeah, so all the NGOs, all the non-for-profits are required by law to file 990s. 990s are public disclosures because they are non-for-profits and they're public facing and they take public money. They have to tell you certain things to stay accountable, right? So they have to tell you how much money their CEOs are getting paid, how much public funding that they've taken. They're kind of lax in telling you what they actually delivered, but you can kind of start to see where the gap is in like, okay, this place has gotten $200 million in government funding, but yet they've delivered maybe 50 trees planted or 10 people employed or 87 homeless taken off the street. So then you start to kind of like build an NGO kind of fraud typology. And we looked at, okay, let's look at the top 15 in each industry, whether it's homelessness, whether it's drug prevention, any of these things. What are the commonalities between all of these? And what you start to notice is that there's aligned incentives for the Democratic politicians and a Democratic machine to take public funds, divert it into these NGOs, and turn these NGOs into get out to vote machines.
You're reading the 990s. Is that the basic?
Correct.
The machine. So, and are these forms? Because I remember when I used to do all this public data transparency work years ago, when I was back in the day in the UK government, the big term we all used was machine readable, so that the algorithm would be able to incredibly quickly go through it. These 990s. Are they, or are they kind of handwritten and, what's the deal with them?
They are ProPublica, which is I don't exactly, I think they're a non-for-profit. I don't really know exactly how they're set up, but ProPublica is a queryable way to look at all 990 public filings.
Right.
It's a treasure trove of data. It's a massive data set. So you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to know the actual name of the non-for-profit or the NGO. But luckily, they take all of that public information and make it machine readable, like you said.
Amazing.
Uh,
So you're our partner on finding some of this information, but your main business is is helping people run for office. Is that am I
Correct.
understanding that right? Okay,
Correct. Our main business is a little bit larger than that. We're kind of your AI solutions partner. And honestly, we're agnostic to who we work with, whether it's large brands. The tools remain the same, whether we're working with a PepsiCo or a Coca-Cola or an Amazon from a reputational perspective and an information perspective and data and harnessing perspective, or someone like yourself who is running for public office. The algorithms remain the same.
the name. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Rhetor is just someone who is good at rhetoric.
Okay.
We just felt like that's what's missing at scale is a two-way discourse where someone is instead of someone talking at you, what we wanted to create is a platform where you can talk with people.
Okay, it's amazing what you've built. If people are watching or listening and want to get involved, or so, what's the right next step? How do you want people to think of you and Reda?
Yeah, if you are either running for public office or you work on a brand, large, small, medium-sized company, we want to help you be more efficient and use some of these tools. It doesn't need to be something as large as Cal Doge. It could be something as simple if you're running 11 to 25 person company and you're like, hey, I'm having I have a struggle communicating with people. Just go to our website, fill out a request. You'll probably be talking to me at the end of it because I'm the head of sales and the only sales guy. But what we're really trying to do is just be your solutions partner.
Fantastic. So it's Reda.ai.
Correct.
Amazing. And then you're very active on X as well. So tell everyone where they can follow you.
Yeah, you can follow me, Jeremy _ on X. You can follow me, Jeremy _ Rhetor on Instagram. And then obviously, in California, hoping to fix California.
Jeremy, great to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Okay, that is our show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow the campaign and get involved in everything that we're doing. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com. And join us again next week for the next episode of The Steve Hilton Show. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Tell your friends. We'll see you back here next week.